Hello, Reading Room. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. We are here on day 193 of the classroom, and we are reading, still reading. But you know what? Who cares how long it takes us? I might even read a big fat book, God is Red. I might do that. I'd have to renew it beyond the whatever, the legal limit for libraries, but that's a thick book, but it does have a huge appendix and notes. So it actually is only 300 pages long. And you know, it's large margins, and so I'm committed. I'm reading this next. God is Red. I'm so excited because everything I've read, I love. Like it's the last thing I read at nighttime. I don't read a lot of it because I get tired at nighttime when I get into bed, and I don't like to really do much but read in bed. But you know, prefer to do some other things, but I've been alone a long time. Being Catholic Now by Kerry Kennedy. And we are reading about what Dan Aykroyd had to say. He's passed on. So don't let those things fool you out there in the media with Dennis Miller dying and then coming back and then dying and coming back. Who even knows? Dan Aykroyd, Daniel Edward Aykroyd, born July 1st, 1952, is a Canadian comedian, actor, screenwriter, and musician. He was an original cast member of Saturday Night Live, an originator of the Blues Brothers with John Belushi, and has had a long career as a film actor and screenwriter. His films include 1941, Trading Places, Ghostbusters, and Driving Miss Daisy. That was a really good movie. He was really good in that movie, which brought him a Best Supporting Actor Oscar nomination. As a boy, Aykroyd was educated in a Catholic seminary, and he has strong opinions about Catholicism. Most Catholics do. But some won't say anything. I was in grade 3, 6 years old, going to English Catholic school and the English Catholic Church in Hull, Quebec. One Sunday, my family was taken to Mass, and the Monsignor there, we'll call him Monsignor K, was presiding, and my father went up to the railing, kneeled down, and was baptized. I asked my mom what was going on, and she said, well, this is the day your father's becoming a Catholic. He'd been a high Anglican. That was a vivid day. That was the day my father fully accepted Catholicism, its teachings, and his pursuit of Christianity in a new direction. He became a preacher and preached in Texas. He was a fundamentalist. He loves the Bible. As a kid before Catholicism, he went on missions, but under pressure. I think from my mother, a French Canadian Catholic, and my grandmother, he had to convert to Catholicism. When I was 9 years old, I was staying over at my grandmother and grandfather's house, and one night I was going upstairs to bed, and my grandfather was on his knees with the rosary, his head bent in prayer, and above his bed was a picture of Christ. That to me was a beautiful and genuine testimony and tableau of a man's deep connection to his faith. About 5 years later, I spent a spectacular Christmas Eve up the Granano River, which runs north of Ottawa in the oldest mountains in the world, the Gatineau Hills. Wow, the oldest mountains in the world? What? That's so interesting. We rented a farm there every summer and winter. So they had no mountains in, Pakistan. Interesting. The local priest asked if I would read the lesson for the night, and a farmer sent a sleigh with horses to pick us up, and we went up the highway to the little church about 3 miles away. The church was completely packed with people, and I got up, and the lectern was right next to an air vent that was blowing hot air. All the way through the lesson, I thought I was doing a good job, but people were laughing. Apparently, the vent was blowing my coat halfway up my back in this billowing wave as if I had tails. And after they told me what it was that was making them all laugh. This is a vivid memory of ritual, of atmosphere, and all of those things that you would associate with a great Christmas Eve and a great midnight mass in a country church. Then I take you to reminiscence number 4. It's 1968 and I'm 17, 18 years old, and it is a bitter, bitter cold February night. And me and 3 other guys get into my dad's 1966 Ford Custom 500 and we drove over to Quebec. I heard about this orphanage that had been shut down and was abandoned, and I said, guys, we got to go over there and take a look at this place. Maybe we can get something for the walls of our house. So we drive over to this orphanage on the outskirts of Hull in this brutally cold blue night. And we come to this massive chain link fence like you see around construction sites, closed off, and there looming behind it is a 9-story orphanage from the turn of the century, a big stone building with completely blown out windows. They're all ready to tear it down for construction. So we clip a hole in the fence and we go inside. The halls are lined with these eerie busts of nuns with glasses on. One looks like a crow. So that's a picture from here up, right? One looks like a crow. One looks like a stork. The whole place has been trashed. The toilets are gone. The plumbing's gone. People have picked it all over, but they've left these statuaries. Then we get into this one room, and there must have been 400 crucifixes just thrown into a corner. So we load the car with every conceivable bust and statue, pack it full of crucifixes and oratory and baptismal fonts, and we take them and we load them into the car and we go to our house on Metcalf Street and we plaster the walls with this stuff. We had crucifixes everywhere and busts and statuary. About 2 weeks later, the house is raided because some of us were engaged in selling, well, combustibles, you might say. So the police, the Ottawa police, send in their narcotics squad and they come to the door, no warrants or anything. They come in because they expect to find some activity. Actually, we kind of knew they were coming, so we stopped everything. They get in the house and their expressions I'll never forget. These cops were silent and awestruck. Every type of crucifix and conceivable gore was plastered on the walls. Every room had a nun, and they slowly backed out of the house and went down the steps. Must be a cult, they thought. They assumed all the stuff was stolen, so they confiscated it, took it all to the police station, where it was a marvel to the cops there. How could anybody have this much reliquary or iconography in one place? Iconography in one place. And they hunted around town, and of course it wasn't stolen because nobody wanted it anymore. When I came to write The Blues Brothers, having been through these experiences of going to the seminary, being in churches where you had really vivid depictions of the crowns of thorns and the eeriness of the Stations of the Cross, it was only natural that I'd create the character of the nun. So these are the material associations of Catholicism that remain in my memory. What's interesting is the combustibles. You just sort of what? You just sort of rolled right over that? What's up with that? And we all know John Belushi got, well, Richard Pryor did, but John Belushi did do that crack cocaine. I thought it was John Belushi at first. Then it was Richard Pryor. I don't know. It's hard to tell. When I finished grammar school, my parents decided that they wanted to put me in the Catholic school system in Ottawa because they thought the public school system in Hull was not quite right. They thought I'd get a better education there. What does that mean? They sat me down and said, we're going for an interview. You'll talk to Father Lenny there, and he'll ask if you would consider a career in the priesthood. You better answer yes if you want to get in this school. So we went to the school, and Father Lenny said, well, Dan, we're considering having you come here to be one of our students. Do you think a career in the priesthood is something that would interest you? And my answer was, no, yeah, sure. Because my parents really wanted me to. I went there for 4 years and was a complete ringleader, breaking out of the dorm at night and having girls over to the dorm. The seminary sent a letter to my parents saying, we feel that Dan is not really suitable for the priesthood. I then went on to a mixed school and got introduced to girls, Catholic girls, in the classic white blouses and plaid skirts. I actually remember those times. Actually, I did. Where the priest would ask you, and that helped you get into the school, and the rejection of you basically in the priesthood. Yeah, it would go hand in hand because you didn't really want to be a priest. I then went on to a mixed school and got introduced to girls, Catholic girls in the classic white blouses and plaid skirts. From then on, there was really no more overt religious training. I stopped going to church. I went to Carleton University where I studied criminology and then went into show business. My stance today is that one doesn't need religion to lead a spiritual and moral life. I believe in the afterlife, but I believe it is a bioscientific fact. I think the soul lives on, but I don't think it has to live on in a Catholic sense, a Buddhist sense, or a Hindu sense. We are born with consciousness, you get it? And then experience tumbles into that, and we are conscious, that's the word, of experience. And then you take consciousness and experience, and that equals self-identity and self-determination. I believe that consciousness plus identity and self-determination is where you're going to come to some kind of crossroads morally. And I fully agree with this and believe that I felt this way as well. You don't need a religion to be ethical and moral. When you kill, you then cross a moral line. When you steal, you cross a moral line. But to covet, to have envy, to have greed, these are just vulnerabilities that one has to deal with in one's life. So Catholicism is no longer necessary for me to lead my life and lead it in a moral and ethical way. I am extremely ethical and I am a moral person, but I don't need Catholicism in my life today. Well, I don't know. Anyone could say that, but is that really true? What were those explosives? Can you explain that, Dan Aykroyd? When I went to the Vatican, I thought that, and also can you explain that now that you're in the afterlife, the biochemical scientific fact or the bioscientific fact? Could you explain that? Now that you're in the afterlife, you might want to explain it to us. That'd be cool. Since it's science. When I went to the Vatican, I thought that it was one of the most frightening places I've ever seen. We were in Rome for the Blues Brothers 2000, and I just got the history of the church. You think back to those corrupt popes. when they were sleeping with their sisters and daughters, and the power of these statues. I imagined these poor farmers and poor Italian people coming in over the hundreds of years and seeing these massive looming marble statues and then going away and giving half their fortune to the church. I absolutely believe the Vatican works on the scale of a separate government, a separate country, and is capable of tremendous crimes. Where my affection is still maintained is the frontline Catholic Church, the local church, the poor local priest there who gets nothing. You see these poor priests trying to make it in communities, rural and urban, all over the world, and they're getting nothing from the head office. They can't even put a roof on their church. They barely have vehicles to drive. They have initiatives that are totally supported by the parishioners, and nothing comes down from the head office. Even your Burger King franchise does better than the franchise in the Catholic Church. I do appreciate the church architecture, the architecture of the Vatican, of these basilicas and cathedrals. It's quite impressive, but there definitely was a deliberate imposition of style, grandeur, and scale that was at work to keep the parishioners and the attendees in their place. I'm conscious of that when I go into these magnificent churches and cathedrals and am made to feel smaller than God, when in fact we're part of God and we should feel an equality with that energy. I go to church occasionally in the summer. I like to make it in there once just to support the local priest. Let him know I'm part of the community. I have sympathy and love for these priests and sisters who are on the front line. I will give my love and I'll give my money. I put a roof on our Catholic Church locally, and I'll support my local church because I respect that some people need this ministry in their lives. I think God is in all of us. God is a universal force that has a spark in everything from the smallest mosquito to mankind. And when we commune and do good things in the world, that's God and good works in practice. I just can't restrict my notion of God to a figurehead or an iconic image. And Jesus certainly is an iconic image. I've always believed people need different things. And somebody said it in here. It might have been that, what was her name? Had a really short one, which means I'll never find it. Let's continue. God is a universal force that has, I said that, a spark in everything. And there are times that I have to remember that too. That God, I forgot that. I did forget that. Because when you talk about children of God, then you're like, then God must not be in some people. And that just is not true. That's just not true. I don't believe that for a minute. So, when you have any kind of, so practically speaking, when you have any kind of a criminal force, you should be able to speak to the God within that person. I've always believed that. It's been a long time since I visited that thought. It has been, because it has felt like an us against them. And that there are many, many people who don't believe that God is in everyone. Many, many people. And that is why we are racially divided. Because for some people, that's the best way to be able to tell whether or not they're a child of God, by something physical about them, right? You caused that disease. You cause that situation. It makes it easier for people to be able to distinguish the bad from the good. But it's an easy way out. It is not highly accurate at all. Not to statistical significance. Look it up. I'm reading. I'd embrace gay and lesbian priests because I don't believe homosexuality is immoral. I draw the line at bestiality because it's unfair to the dog or the cat. If the dog or the cat had consciousness, then they'd be okay with me. Okay. Sexuality has nothing to do with morality. I admire Christ. Whether he was in reality the Son of God or not is irrelevant to the values he's brought to the world, and to the world in little codes like, to those whom much has been given, much will be required. Amen, Dan Aykroyd. Amen. And amen about the, I was thinking about this a little bit more in detail about if I were Pope, what really would I say? I mean, I've already said keep it in the bedroom, but does that create an unhealthy relationship? Does homosexuality create an unhealthy relationship? And I just don't believe so. I don't, or whatever. I just don't believe, homosexuality. I just don't believe so. I just don't believe that. I think that if you deceive people but it's easy to deceive people when you've got pressures from different groups to behave in certain ways or support certain things. So automatic pressures there that we see, and then it you can't see a clear path. I don't think it's, let's all be gay ranchers, whoop, whoop, whoop. I'm not sure that that's what that God had in mind to better the human spirit. And I think that that's critical. I think that is expected of humans, that we better the human spirit, but that is an individualistic course. When I made my choices always in somewhere in the back of my mind, in the middle of my brain, and in the forefront of my brain where I was thinking and churning it up, was always there. I know I have a purpose. I know that being raped is a way that certain groups try and stop people like me with a God-given purpose. I know that. And so that was early on. I knew it wasn't going to stop me. And it may have been because I was vocal about being certain things in a very white community. Like everyone knew I was Mexican. My last name was Garcia. So it just wasn't hard to figure out. And so then it became, you like me, but you hate me? I don't get that at all. It's really hard to digest that. So it may have come at a very early age from facing that in a highly white Christian rural area, Fremont, Michigan. So right in my face, right? And I would get dark in the summertime because it was beautiful. And that's what you did. You laid out in the sun. Why wouldn't I? And I would wear pink and white so everybody could see how dark I was and how beautiful that was. But I got, Jennifer Lopez kind of tan in the summertime. So, a beautiful color bronze in the summertime. So, it was like in your face, You enjoy every part of who I am, and yet you degrade me, both as a woman and being Mexican. And you don't even say you're different, because that's how white they were. They were like, yep, yep, yep. You know, keeping information from me means I don't have all the information, so it's easier to degrade people. So that is just how I interjected my experience. I flip through the Bible occasionally. I like and now I read the Bible a lot less than I used to, but I have read the Bible a lot through my life. I would say, you know, not every day, so not nearly as much as most people do. But because I'm a teacher, I was always referencing the Bible. How many times have we read from the Bible in the early birds? So always digesting different scripture in different ways for me. So always. But again, I didn't read the Bible, you know, from cover to cover till I think it was something like in my 20s. I think that was a goal that I had after I graduated with my bachelor's. It was a goal that I had that summer, was to read the Bible. I usually accomplish what I set out to accomplish, especially something like that. How important that would be to me. I like the Old Testament for all the slashing and burning and fornicating and all that, because it's adventurous. I love the Christmas story, but I'm not overtly religious in any way, and I'm not out there crusading. I will say the values of Christ are vital to our world. It's really all we have left in terms of treating people humanely. And that makes me just want to burst into tears. The truth of what he says right there, first of all, and how, you know, how true it is still today, and decade after decade after decade, and we're getting further and further away from knowing Christ and reading about him and believing that his ways make any difference. To get in touch with my spirituality, I get on the motorcycle and ride. I totally get that, but I haven't been on a motorcycle and wouldn't. But anyway, but I get it. I feel the earth and the wind. Just the miracle of symmetry in everything, the grandness of nature, its randomness, its chaos, its joy. I think that I see spirituality in animals and plants, and also I guess I draw inspiration from the works of others. When I see good works being done in a community, I want to help out. And spirit is a very personal thing. For me, it's linked to just the life force on the planet and getting in touch with that. Plowing, trying to project loving energy, trying to suppress anger and my bad temper. I think if I put out positive energy and plow that forward like a snow plow, then that's going to bounce back on the plow and bounce back through the windshield on me. That's my husband right there. That's him. I don't envy people who are devout like Mel Gibson and have that devout Catholicism that drives them and gives them a source of power in life. I'm happy for them, but I don't wish I had that or feel it's missing. At some point, we just have to make a choice for authority or against it. It's like the cops I've known who did acid and coke and smoked pot, and now they're cops and they're enforcing the law. If you can ride the edge and have a little rebelliousness in your life and also be conventional like my father, that's great. He was an absurdist. He had a tremendous career in government, but we'd go shopping in a local grocery store, and just to keep his anarchist side alive, he'd grab a roll of toilet paper and whip it over the aisle just to hear someone yell, "Hey, what the fuck?" He knew no one was going to get hurt, but that it would shake people up. We were always taught to take care of those who were less fortunate. I went to camp one summer and I got a trophy for being the best camper, and it wasn't because I knew how to light a fire with a flint. It wasn't because I saved a sick turtle or mastered woodcraft. It was because I identified a few of the youngest campers who were being picked on, and took them under my wing and made sure that they had my approval. I had certain status and respect at the camp. That came directly from teachings of compassion, and I got that trophy because I helped those kids get through camp without having a miserable time. In my own life, I've taught my children compassion. I don't care what they do and where they go in life. If they take compassion for their fellow men with them, if they take compassion for their fellow men with them. I teach my kids that the guy on the street pushing the cans is no better than me, and I'm no better than him. Something happened in his life to take him where he is today. I feel guilty when I've wronged another human being. I don't feel any Catholic or Judeo-Christian guilt except when I've hurt another human being. I was a thief and I never felt guilty about it. This was in Canada when I was in college. I was studying criminology. I was also in this gang of thieves. We were hijacking big meat company trucks and cigarette company trucks. At that time, the cigarette companies had the people right by the nuts and the short hairs. They were exploiting the people with the substance that was addictive, and the government was charging taxes. To break open a parked truck of cigarettes and take those cartons and go sell them, we felt we were doing society a favor. But the big meat companies polluted and slaughtered hogs in these horrible ways and exploited their workers. So we stole hams and turkeys and gave them out for Christmas. That was a positive social move for me. We weren't robbing from people. We were robbing from big corporations. It was kind of legitimized at that time. I never felt guilty about that. I felt guilty when I have to break a promise. I feel guilty when I hurt people in my family or my friends. If I've had to cross them for certain reasons out of self-absorption or selfishness. I ain't never killed nobody. I ain't never killed nobody. I ain't never gonna kill nobody. The person I am today was largely formed by my religion, but I don't need religion for my faith. I have my own faith. If I need to pray, I pray in my own way. I pray for people who are sick, and I believe in this concept of doing circles of prayer and calling people up and saying, so-and-so is sick, let's pray for him at a certain time. This is just remarkable humanism. I've wanted to weep, and I did several times because what he is, who knew Dan Aykroyd, who knew? But I think I got a book after that about Dan Aykroyd, and it seemed nothing like what he was saying here. So I appreciated Dan Aykroyd, his book, where you actually get the meat and potatoes of what he was doing. It was like, yeah, check your conscience. But I don't know if I have a perfect memory right there, Dan. So I don't want to, your memory. Patooey on your memory. It's not necessarily calling God to do it, but it's more focusing your energy together and thinking about that person's condition and hoping and focusing on bettering the condition. I pray in that way. And then we have evil people who have seen that works for evilness. And so I believe both ways, and so bravo to you for praying the right way, Dan Aykroyd. There is one thing that I really liked about Catholicism growing up. Confession, free psychiatric and psychological help. I think for the first communion, there was some tiny little sin to confess. I went to confession all through the seminary, and some of the sessions would go on for half an hour where we'd really get into some root causes of human behavior. All of the teacher at All of the teachers at the school were very well educated and they were really good men. So you'd go to confession and the screen would slide by and you'd go, oh God, it's my religion teacher, or oh God, it's my math teacher. I'm going to have to tell him, and he'll be seeing me in class and no. But then it would evolve into a discussion of why people behave a certain way and how to react with other human beings and how to maybe temper reactions and cause betterment in your own life. And you know what? I think that this is what we really missed as girls. No, because we would have the nuns, but you know, there was just so much infiltration. It felt like to me, I did not have a positive experience in Catholic school, but looking back, that's just simply not true. It probably saved me. It probably saved me. It was the really disappointing experience that I had, and I felt that the nuns were very strict. But I felt that the nuns were very strict because it could have been very easy for me to go astray. I think I used to cuss all the time underneath as a little girl underneath my breath, and that may have been the reason why I had to go to Catholic school. But also, I think that I would cuss in my head and people knew it. And I would try different things. Like I would save the passion of my words and blank out the cuss words that I had in my head. Which is what I should do in early birds. But one of the reasons why I don't is because cuss words are so normalized. They're so normalized. They're so part of regular speech. And I find them to be necessary to get a point across. I said it a long time ago. Nobody pays attention to somebody who says, gosh darn it, which would be the substitute, because a good Christian wouldn't say God. So they wouldn't even say, God darn it. No, you have lost anybody who's male, who's a genuine heterosexual male. You've lost them with your little gosh darn it. Speak other language. As we see, Dan Aykroyd is speaking mine. There is one thing that I really liked about Catholicism growing up. We already read that. All the teachers at the school were very well. Yep, got that. What happens when you die is the soul's energy goes into the multiverse and it goes to a parallel dimension. Now, when this is his bioscientific thought, but this is thought of what I believe is part of Discovery Institute and many of those students, but also whatever they're covering up as their, and you are what you are, but if you have cultish, what is that? I don't know. But if you have cultish ways about you, right, then maybe you are hiding your associations. So associations that you have with other religions. That was just a really weird thing that just popped up on my screen. So it kind of freaked me out a little bit. So associations that you might have, for example, with Scientology. And also that Catholics might also have, for example, with Scientology or with Discovery Institute or with science in general. I think that it's fair for Catholics to be able to investigate what is going on in popular religion, popular culture, popular ideas, and see if they are missing something, right? Okay, let's keep reading. Now what'd you just do? Now that they zapped my brain. The first stage, I believe, from what I've read and my personal belief, is one meets everyone whom one has known in life in a big reunion, like a party. Only those who have gone before are there. So when I go, I'll be greeted by Gilda, John, my grandparents, and my parents. If I don't predecease them, which is a distinct possibility, totally agree with that. And I'll see John Candy, for instance, coming to me and saying, great to see you, catching up on things. And he'll say, I have to go now. I can't spend any more time because when my soul went across, they already assigned me to another entity for another function. I'm just here to welcome you across and know that at the end of this reunion, everyone will vanish and you will have no consciousness of your former life. You're going to go on and your soul energy is going to go on to another task and be reassigned, as it were. I remember when Belushi died in the cathedral, there were 3 pregnant women, and I thought, his spirit has got to be going on in 1 or 2 of them. I believe in the continuity of the soul energy and a bioelectric fact, as a bioelectric fact. And you'll have many people debate me on that, but it's my personal belief. Well, that's so interesting, but then I don't know. I find I may have predeceased people, but that you reconnect with the consciousness is what I think. You reconnect with those former lies. I've had those memories. So I do think I just think I'm a leader in that way. I'm a teacher, right? In that way. It's what I think. So no fear in death, right? That there is life after death. I believe that because I believe so many people have been after me. I believe that I've been under a spray of bullets before, and that was in Mexico. I don't know if I was right. And, but I'm not worried about my son because I know that certain things that Ackroyd was just talking about is true. It's very interesting that he just pops in there. But these are things that he believes. So, you say, well, where's your evidence, Ackroyd? For who? For you? I don't need it. What I mean is I have my evidence. I'm a scientific mind. I might look for more evidence than most people do. I think that I do. I stop and think and consider many different perspectives without fear, many different religions without fear, and perspectives. Like I said, I just think it was just absurd that Bill Maher got fired from ABC for saying, hey, somebody's mad. Maybe we better take a look at who's so pissed off. I'm pretty sure that's what I read and heard. Losing this consciousness, I think that did happen in middle life. I think in older life, I think I'm getting it back. I think I don't think that that's right of God to let someone forget their children. I just don't think that sounds like a understanding God, a God that understands the human condition. And maybe, Jesus had to, tilt the perspective in certain ways for us to understand God. Maybe God really is. Maybe it really is that, reading God is read, which I think we're going to do next. Maybe it really is that there is this middle earth where people did crawl out of this middle earth, that there are stories that say that. And maybe the people on the earth experienced the flood, right? Maybe, who knows? Who knows? But that always brings up concerns. You can't take your neighbor having a different idea or look. How are you going to take Middle Earth people? And you know what they look like. Woo! We saw that picture. And the I can't remember where we saw it. Was that in the American YAWP? I don't remember, but we saw that picture. Woo! That still disturbs me. Not my sleep or anything. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. We're supposed to see who we have next before we move on. And who we have next is Cardinal Theodore Edgar McCarrick. He looks just like the other one. Why do they all look? This is Dr. Annette Feravich. We are here on day 193 of the reading room. The reading room has been here since the very beginning of the classroom. So we read short books, we read long books, we read kids' books, we read adult books. Thanks for joining me here in the reading room. It is hump day. I wasn't going to say it.